Imagine watching the same player get hit, grabbed, kneed, and shoved for an entire season, and every single time the whistle stays silent. Now imagine that player is the reason your league is on national television in the first place, the reason ticket demand spiked, the reason casual fans who never watched a WNBA game before suddenly know her name. That's not a hypothetical. That's been the last few months of the WNBA season, and it's a mess nobody in the league office wants to talk about on camera. Let's start with the moment that actually broke Caitlin Clark's patience in public. It was a loss to the Golden State Valkyries. Clark took a knee straight to the quad during a play, no whistle, no foul, nothing. She stayed in the game, kept playing on a leg that was visibly bothering her, and finished the night shooting 1 for 8 from 3, clearly hampered by pain she was trying to play through. Afterward, she didn't hold back. She told reporters, in her own words, that she got kneed right in the quad, that it hurt, that the ref couldn't miss that, and that having to play the rest of the game with a contusion in her leg was ridiculous. That's not a media outlet's interpretation. That's Clark, on the record, furious, in front of cameras, right after the final buzzer. And this wasn't some isolated flare-up that came out of nowhere. Anyone who's followed Clark's career knows the injury history already. Her 2025 season was wrecked by a string of lower body injuries, including 2 separate quad contusions that limited her to just 13 games that year. 13 games, for the single most-watched player in the league, the player broadcast partners were building entire schedules around. So when fans saw her get kneed in almost the same spot again in 2026, with no call from the officials standing right there, the reaction wasn't just about one missed whistle in one game. It was about a pattern people felt they'd already lived through once, with real, documented consequences for her availability and her health. Her head coach, Stephanie White, backed her up publicly, and it cost her. After a separate game, Indiana's first game without Clark once the injury forced her to finally sit. A reporter asked White point-blank whether the league needed to step in and protect its top players from what he called intentionally rough play. White's answer got her fined by the league office. She didn't walk it back afterward either, which is notable, because most coaches in her position take the fine quietly and move on to safer talking points the next day. White didn't do that. She said something that stuck with a lot of people covering the team, that sometimes great players don't tell you when they're hurting, and that she was glad Clark finally did, because the league needed to nip this in the bud before it got worse. A head coach getting fined for saying her franchise player deserves more protection on the court is not a small thing in professional sports. It's the kind of comment coaches usually route around carefully, in vague terms, specifically to avoid a fine. White went the other direction. This also wasn't the first flashpoint of the season, not even close. Weeks earlier, Clark took a shot to the throat from Phoenix Mercury forward Alyssa Thomas during a loose ball scramble near midcourt. In real time, officials reviewed the play and decided it wasn't even a flagrant foul. Not a foul at all. In the moment, on a shot to the throat, with multiple camera angles available to the review team. It took the league days, not minutes, to go back, review it again under more scrutiny, and upgrade the play to a flagrant 2, at which point Thomas was suspended for 1 game. Clark said afterward that she believed officials got the initial call wrong, and made clear this wasn't just about that single play in isolation. Her exact words were that it's kind of been a discussion for 3 years now, and that the league really needs to do a better job protecting the people in it. 3 years. Said publicly by the player at the center of the league's biggest ratings boom in a decade, not by an anonymous fan account online. The fallout from the Thomas situation got uglier than a lot of people expected, and it's worth sitting with that part honestly rather than skipping past it. After Thomas was suspended, she said publicly that she had been receiving death threats and racist messages in the days that followed, and the WNBA actually put out a statement defending her from that harassment. So now you had 2 true things sitting side by side at the same time. A player facing genuine, ugly, unacceptable abuse over 1 bad hit, and a star player who felt, with real justification based on her injury history, that she'd been absorbing hits like that all season with no protection at all from the people whose entire job is to call it. Both of those things being true simultaneously is exactly why this story refuses to collapse into a clean villain and victim narrative, no matter how badly some corners of the internet want it to for the sake of a tidier headline. Then there's the racial angle, which isn't something outside commentators invented out of nowhere to stir up clicks. It's something that's actively been discussed inside serious reporting on this entire saga. Clark is a white player in a league that is predominantly black, and a vocal segment of her fan base has pushed the idea that other players, and even referees, resent her popularity and treat her worse on the floor because of it. That framing has been publicly pushed back on by plenty of people inside the league too, who point out that officiating inconsistency has been a season-long, league-wide storyline affecting multiple players, not something invented or exaggerated around one specific star. Toronto Tempo coach Sandy Brondello actually got suspended for one game, without pay, after calling Atlanta's Angel Reese a protected species during a heated exchange with officials, a phrase aimed squarely at the idea that Reese was getting favorable whistles the way Clark's critics claim she isn't. So the complaint that a star gets protected calls, or doesn't get them, has been made from more than one direction this season, aimed at more than one player, by more than one coach willing to risk a fine over it. It even reached Congress, which tells you how far outside the world of sports talk radio this had already spread. A group of 11 Republican members of the House sent a formal letter to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert demanding accountability and raising concerns about how the league was handling player safety and officiating consistency. Whatever you think about lawmakers weighing in on basketball officiating specifically, the fact that it escalated to that level tells you the pressure on the league office wasn't just coming from sports talk shows or Twitter threads anymore. It was coming from multiple directions at once, and the commissioner has had to publicly answer for it more than once as a result. Clark's own relationship with officials has gotten messy too, and it's worth being honest about that instead of only telling the half of the story that frames her purely as the victim in every clip. She's picked up technical foul after technical foul this season, arguing calls in real time, to the point where by mid-season she was sitting on 6 technicals with an automatic 1-game suspension kicking in at 8, and additional suspensions stacking up after that for every 2 more she picks up. Her own coach has openly said the team now has to be strategic about how Clark reacts to officiating in the moment, because her visible frustration boiling over on the court has become its own recurring storyline running alongside everything else happening around her. This isn't simply refs versus Clark, black and white. It's a player increasingly convinced the whistle isn't there for her when she genuinely needs it, reacting in ways that sometimes cost her own team technicals and put her closer to sitting out games entirely, while her coaching staff tries to manage both problems, the missed calls and her reactions to them, at the same time. And Clark isn't the only flashpoint in games involving her this season either. There was a separate contest against the Connecticut Sun where tensions boiled over into a full-blown skirmish. It started when Connecticut's J.C. Sheldon poked Clark in the eye while defending her. Clark shoved Sheldon away, and moments later Connecticut guard Marina Mabry knocked Clark to the floor with a hard, forceful bump. In real time, officials only gave Mabry a technical foul for it. It wasn't until after the game that the league went back and upgraded that play to a flagrant 2 as well, the same pattern seen with the Alyssa Thomas incident. The in-game call falls short, and only after the fact, once the footage circulates and the criticism builds, does the league correct itself. That same night ended with Indiana's Sophie Cunningham getting ejected for a hard foul of her own on Sheldon during a breakaway layup attempt, which triggered a bigger confrontation involving players, coaches, and security from both benches. 6 technical fouls and 2 flagrants in a single game is not normal, and it's exactly the kind of night that fuels the argument that officials are consistently a step behind the physicality actually happening on the floor around Clark and her teammates, rather than getting ahead of it. There's also the All-Star vote controversy, which added its own layer of tension to all of this. When All-Star voting results came out, Clark ranked 2nd among guards in the fan vote and 3rd in the media vote, reflecting exactly the kind of mainstream popularity that's been driving the league's ratings all season. But among the players themselves, voting for who they wanted to see selected, she ranked 11th. That gap, a top 3 player by public and press vote landing outside the top 10 by her peers, fed directly into the narrative that some players resent the attention and disproportionate protection people believe Clark receives off the court, even while critics argue she isn't getting nearly enough protection on it. It's a genuinely uncomfortable contradiction sitting right at the center of this whole story, and it doesn't resolve cleanly in either direction no matter how hard either side tries to spin it. What actually did happen after the quad injury? in terms of concrete league action, is more limited than a lot of clickbait headlines circulating online have claimed. There's no confirmed suspension of 3 officials directly tied to Clark's quad injury, whatever certain YouTube titles might suggest. What's actually confirmed is that her coach got fined for defending her publicly and refused to back down about it afterward, that the league upgraded at least 2 separate dangerous plays against Clark to suspensions only after initially missing them in real time during the game itself, and that a completely separate coach got suspended over comments about a different star's treatment by officials entirely. The WNBA has also assembled a task force made up of coaches and executives specifically to deal with concerns about excessive physicality and inconsistent officiating, and brought in a longtime veteran official as a new referee performance and development advisor to try to address it structurally. And according to Clark herself, along with multiple veteran voices around the league, none of that has actually fixed the underlying problem yet, even months into having that task force in place. Former WNBA All-Star Katie Douglas put it plainly when she spoke about the need for change, drawing a clear line between what counts as legitimately physical basketball and what's simply an uncalled foul that's being allowed to slide. Longtime broadcaster and WNBA legend Rebecca Lobo has done the same thing live on air during a broadcast, pointing out specific back-to-back sequences where Clark was grabbed and held multiple times in a row with no whistle at all, walking viewers through the replay in real time so they could see exactly what she meant. These aren't fringe voices chasing engagement with a hot take. These are people who've spent decades in and around this exact league, playing in it and calling it on television, saying essentially the same thing Clark herself has been saying publicly since well before this particular season even started. So where does that actually leave things right now? Clark is still playing, sometimes on a minutes restriction while managing lingering injuries, still putting up numbers that keep her firmly in the MVP conversation, still drawing the kind of national broadcast attention the league spent decades trying to manufacture on its own and never quite could until she showed up. The officiating controversy hasn't gone away and shows no sign of resolving itself quietly. The league's own commissioner has publicly promised for more than a year now that it would get fixed, promises that, according to Clark and several coaches around the league, still haven't translated into consistently accurate calls on the court game after game. The real test was never going to be a press release or a fine handed down quietly after the fact once the damage is already done. It's whether the next time Clark gets hit the way she was against Golden State, or the way she was hit in the throat by Alyssa Thomas, the whistle actually blows in real time, in the moment it happens, before the internet has to do the league's job for it by replaying the footage frame by frame the next morning. That's the story as it's actually documented, messy and unresolved, and involving real accountability gaps on more than one side of it, rather than a single tidy conspiracy with a clean villain and a bow on top. Whether the league finally closes the gap between what it keeps promising in press conferences and what actually happens in real time on the court is the only thing that's going to settle this argument for good. Right now, months into the season, that gap is still wide open, and everyone paying attention knows it.